up this incredibly awesome music to bring you some incredibly awesome political talk on Damn Radio.
Hello, good evening, welcome. I am Samuel Trapp. This is International Flavor. I'm glad you're joining me this evening at the Lake Ozark Real Estate of the Art Studio. You can always listen live by going to damnradio.com/live. You can hear all the past podcasts saved in all their glory on damnradio.com/podcasts, where there's plenty of content there from our other providers as well. And then I have a separate website called internationalflavor.com, and you can always go out there and listen to any past show that is saved there, and there's a good number of them already out there. I don't have, well, I do. I've got plenty of content tonight, but nothing. It's many topics. There's a few things that I'm still grumpy about. I spent most of the day today on state overreach. State of Missouri overreach is kind of rampant, but the state of Missouri is not alone. You know, U.S. government's doing it too. I got some grumpy things to talk with you about that just tend to piss me off. I watched a couple of shows. I like to watch, like I told you, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia. They're Maria Zakharova, and she had one, nothing this week's. This was actually several days ago. I don't remember the exact day that this came out. Then I watched a show, their version of 60 Minutes. They have a 60-minute program over there, which is basically a news program. I watched a news of the day from another TV station over there, that just to see how they put together the news these days. I watched a guy, an economist, and he's pretty cool. He's sometimes on the Vladimir Solovyov show, which I like to see him on there. His name is Mikhail Kazin. I'm not sure the right stress on his last name, but I think it's Kazin, but it might be Kazin. But he's an economist, and it was from yesterday. He gave a little bit of consolidated economic issues. And then one of the couple of things that are really starting to bother me, this Venezuela deal is driving me batty. I just can't imagine that we're doing what it appears to be that we're doing there, and contemplating regime change as if it's our job to force another country to change a regime. All just for the U.S. to do the same thing they attempted to do in Iraq, go in and take all the resources. This is it doesn't make it better just because it's Trump. Let's make that perfectly clear. I'm pretty grumpy about it. There was an Everest whiteout with 1,000 people stranded. There was a landslide in Dagestan that cut off a number of villages. It's like the whole mountain collapsed, and it wasn't snow; it was the mountain itself. France's prime minister got offed again. Well, this guy, he just quit, and Macron has convinced him to stay for till Wednesday. I think the guy agreed to stay till tomorrow. We got more problems there. Ukraine, of course, has got plenty of issues. Moldova is a democratic nightmare. But one of the things, I want to go back to the UN General Assembly just a little bit. There's been a ton of fake news out on YouTube about the president of Burkina Faso giving a speech there. And I don't understand it, but they were everywhere. I mean, all over. And talking about the president of Burkina Faso saying that they weren't going to allow the West to steal their gold or other resources anymore. And although he holds those ideas, he wasn't even the one that spoke at the UN. And so, when I saw the news clippings about it in a number of different places, I went out and tried to find it, because Burkina Faso, they used to be French as the main language in Burkina Faso. But now they still use French, but it's no longer one of the official languages, and they use four African languages over there, although they're quite multicultural. And they also speak English quite a bit. And so the allegation was, or the news, that there's been, a bunch of people have, copied various parts of his speech, and then, they must have AI'd it to have him speaking in English, but I understand he does speak English, but not very well. His language is French, and then he speaks a bunch of the local languages. And it's like, I don't understand who or why is creating these lies online, but, I just want people to be careful. I try to be pretty careful when I go out and hunt down the news and try to, source it from other places too. But geez, I don't want it to be so bad that I don't trust anything from anywhere. I don't trust any of the mainstream ones, but I still listen to them. I just make sure to listen to them from several different places. I still follow a good amount of American news channels as well. And so, at any rate, Jaishankar gave, and we're going to listen to a clip of Jaishankar. I talk about him rather frequently, and there were two things. One's only a 4-minute clip, and the other one's 11. And I do plan to get to those today, because he has a great way of putting things. And when you see the commentaries afterward, and one of them is a month old or so. The other one was last week at the UN General Assembly where he spoke. And I think it's India. I think India has a great approach, and I think he sets off because these Western, and this one that was a month or two ago, is a pretty good example how Western journalists attempted to beat up on him, and he's just like, he put them in their place. Let's put it that way. And so I like watching him. I want to follow his what he did at the UN just in the last few days. And then I want to talk about a little bit about what's going on in France and Germany. And, diplomacy versus, the forced diplomacy of America in Venezuela these days, I suppose, is where we're going with that. Rubio goes down, tries to get the guy to leave and give all of the oil to American companies, and I think, my belief is that is in part to put pressure on Russia, because if the U.S. can, put other pressures on the market, then they can force the oversupply, and then what Russia has will be less valuable, allegedly. And there's a lot of stuff going on, and I'm not so sure that Trump and company are the good guys on the international stage. I've worried about us for a long time, and I always worry about us. It's just frustrating to me on the Trump and Venezuela. We'll get to that a little bit later in the show. But what I thought I would start with would be the Burkina Faso, the guy that, regardless of all the nonsense on the internet right now being posted about this young President Traore, or however you pronounce his name, he's pretty impressive to watch and to listen to if you get the correct translations. But I'm afraid of them. I take most of that with a little bit of grain of salt. However, most of the West A lot of countries in Africa have booted out the French. They're anti-colonialist, and they've been trying to profit from their own resources, what the U.S. is allegedly, or what seems to be attempting to do in Venezuela. The people in Africa have been booting out the Europeans over the last few years and accepting Russia, India, China to come in and fund them or help back them or trade with them without telling them what they will do and without installing a Western company and a Western financial system. So, and Burkina Faso is no exception to that rule. And what it looks like is that there's kind of a reality check going on in the world for the West. And yes, it has to do with BRICS countries. It has to do with the global South. It definitely has to go with the countries of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. It has to do with Russia, India, China. That's turning into a stronger and stronger block between the two. Oh, I meant to say that I missed this. It's on my little list here to speak about Tomahawk missiles as well. I mean, what kind of a nightmare is that? You don't know whether he authorized them or not. Well, I'm not sure what went on with that. It's like he seemed a little confused on the stage today and yesterday when talking about these issues. Well, I'm really, I think I was going to give them to NATO, but I guess we got to see where we're going with those. Something is screwy going on here. You either got to cut... well, don't get me started on that topic. I probably won't leave it. But let's talk about who from Burkina Faso who actually talked, because what's been going on for generations is the gold from these places, which is one of their biggest assets, has been funneled to the West. And now they want to funnel it, keep it themselves, keep it in Africa, or, sell it as they see fit, and they're doing other things. So who spoke at the UN General Assembly this year at the general debate was Prime Minister Rimtalba Jean Emmanuel Ouedraogo, not President Traoré. And so the viral clips of Traoré everywhere on the UN General Assembly stage promising the West isn't going to get any gold are just, I don't know what, motivational remixes. He does have that theme, but it sure wasn't in the General Assembly this year. The policy's definitely real, and they rewrote their mining code in 2024 to expand their own state stake. And they asserted preemptive rights and nationalized a bunch of assets, and they said they were going to continue to do so if there are going to be any disputes. Trading halts and company panics followed as they want a more than 50% control in their own projects. And what that means, it's not a blanket export ban, but resource nationalism with a great deal of teeth. They're going to take a higher state take, tighter controls, and strategic equity. So in plain English, Burkina Faso is not going to be controlled by the West anymore. But the meme goes way too far. The substance is real. Most of the capitals in the Sahel are telling Paris and London, no more colonialism. We're out. And so I think that's important for people to know. Why don't we jump into the Trump, just because it's freaking driving me nuts that, Washington has declared a non-international armed conflict. Now, what does that mean? I mean, you're here making up terms. I mean, I've read several reports today that say there's some sort of a top secret document that says that they can go to war against these cartels because of a threat to America and American security. So you can blow up a speedboat in the middle of the ocean without any sort of... Let's say, imagine you're out in your boat on the Lake of the Ozarks, and all of a sudden somebody has decided from Washington that you're a drug dealer. Maybe you are a drug dealer. I don't know. Maybe you're a drug dealer and you're, headed to, wherever drug dealers go with their boats on the lake. And the president decided, he was advised that, hey, there's a drug dealer out there cruising around. He's a criminal. Therefore, military, blow that a-hole up. He's not going to be a threat to other people. Why? Because I, Donald Trump, said so. Bad people exist and they need to be brought to justice, but you don't just go blow up a boat in the middle of the ocean. It's not my idea of justice. It just isn't, okay? And nobody's... You declare war on a private individual? You declare war on Venezuela? How do you do that without the Congress? I am not for this in any stretch. Maybe someone can call and encourage me to change my mind, but I freaking doubt it. And because it just this is a little bit of a bridge too far for me, and I don't like it. And I see too much of this stuff, more and more. I mean, there's 4 boats blown up. Come on. So you're labeling these operatives unlawful combatants, and then so therefore you get to carry out a lethal strike on an alleged smuggling boat in the Caribbean. Not in Venezuela, in the Caribbean. No trial, no civilian Venezuelan death reported, and civilian Venezuelan death reported by regional leaders. He now has cut off diplomatic ties, diplomatic outreach, as of today, allegedly, and is making strikes inside of Venezuela. Now, what are we complaining about Vladimir Putin for then? Let the guy do what he wants. I mean, if we're going to go blow up stuff in Iran, which, Trump did, that's no problem. Bibi wants it. Well, go ahead. Have fun. You want to do it yourself in Venezuela? Oh, geez. Go ahead. Sure, we can justify that. That's perfectly legal. But it's not okay if your name is Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin. Once again, rules for thee, but not for me. And definitely no rules for Israel. 0. War Powers Act, it's a dodge. There's supposedly some sort of authority to sidestep. Lawmakers are demanding a war power vote, and targeted killing as a policy. This is not police work at all. Regime change. Publicly, it's cartels. Practically, it boxes in Maduro, chokes oil flexibility for Moscow's friends, and signals to OPEC that Washington wants its leverage back. How are they going to get it? Start another war. This is what we do. What are the risks of this? They're huge. Maritime misidentification, escalation on shore, and sanction spiral that pushes Caracas further into BRICS plus states. And Colombia's Petro even called for a criminal case over the killings. So it's not like the other side isn't saying it. For me, it's the same old playbook with a new player, new hashtags. If you bomb first and brief later, you're not fighting drugs. You're auditioning for another forever war and oil repricing. Calling cartels unlawful combatants, is it a necessity for our security? I don't think so. Or is it a legal fig leaf? Does this help U.S. families? I don't think so, unless those families are on Wall Street. Those people, that get to move in and take over oil. If the U.S. does it again, here we are. It's embarrassing to me, these type of things, to once again, we're really not that stupid. I assume people think we are, but once again, it's all about the oil. And I'm not happy with this. I am distressed by it, and I don't like it. So let's go to a little bit about Ukraine and tomahawks, as long as we're on the topic. So tomahawks, storm shadows, Taurus missiles. Ukraine, now allegedly they've been trying to manufacture some inside of Ukraine. There's been a big effort lately to have Ukraine manufacture its own weapons inside of Ukraine. And Russia's been bombing the crap out of alleged factories. Once they find out where the factory is, who's getting them. There was a big report from, I want to say, the Wall Street Journal today that corruption is still extremely alive and well in Ukraine, especially in the military-industrial complex, if you can call it that they're overpaying for everything massively, way overpaying. And a few individuals are getting rich, but they don't have to produce anything because it's always getting blown up. So put a fake factory up there, wait for Russia to blow it up, pocket the money, and move on. That appears to be what's happening more than anything else. So what's the U.S., what's the old Trump Meister doing? He's going to go out and say, well, I'm considering these tomahawks. I think I might have approved them, but I really don't know. I have to go see. I may have sold them to NATO, and NATO might give them to Ukraine. Friends and neighbors, Ukraine cannot target these weapons without U.S. intelligence, just like they can't target the Storm Shadow or the Taurus without Britain. There's one other one, I forget the name of it, but whatever the equivalent is from France, England, and Germany. They must have the targeting data and the people to target it, the intelligence that comes in. That is why Russia keeps saying this is an escalation beyond what there is so far. And it means that we always say that this is a war against NATO anyway, because basically we're fighting the whole of NATO. Nobody even hides it anymore. And everything that they talk about is funding NATO. Germany today was raising their, get this, their retirement age. They're going to have to raise to 73. The Germans are going to have to tighten their belts because we got to give billions and billions to Ukraine. I don't know how much longer the Germans are going to put up with it, especially when, if you're Ukrainian, you can come over at age 25 and get all this free state money just by coming over because you're a refugee and all this social stuff. But you can't retire, by God, until you're 73 if you're a German and worked your whole life in Germany. But geez, if you're a Ukrainian, just wander on over, figure out how to get here, and we'll give you a free quarters, living wage, way to pay all your bills. And hey, if it only lasts for 3-4 months, just move over to Austria. Austria will give you 3-4 months. Then you move over to England. England will throw you a bone for a while. Go to France. They'll do the same. All you got to do is hop all around Europe as a refugee. Go to Poland. Go anywhere. And they will all provide you money if you are a refugee from Ukraine. Poland had a deal a couple of weeks ago that they were saying they were going to start a recruiting station for young, not young, because the young ones aren't being picked up in Ukraine. They are opening recruiting stations in Poland for Ukrainian men to be mobilized. And now they're going to start picking them up in Poland, too. Unbelievable. I don't know, but all the Ukraines, it is not adding up. They want to take strikes deep into Russia. Russia's bombing the crap out of all of Ukraine's energy supply and anything, gas points, where they process gas and deliver gas to the public. It's going to be a bad winter for them over there. And they are taking out airfields, they're taking out water, they're taking out everything. And, and they claim that, and it's true too, because Russia bombed the hell out of Kharkiv today, because Kharkiv is across the border from Belgrade, and Kiev did the same thing. So they're sending over all these places to bomb the crap out of Belgrade because they can reach it from there. That's what they want to do with all these long-range missiles. They want to bombard Russia and their air defense with drones, just like Russia does to Ukraine, and then send in the bigger guns of these missiles and blow up Russia's ability for oil. If Donald Trump does this, he's doing it he's going to allow Ukraine, and with U.S. targeting, to go and blow up Russian oil refineries and Russian processing or pipeline points where this is provided and delivered, so that he can cut the supply. India and China won't quit buying? Well, fine, we'll blow up the points, is what it appears he's thinking by this missile nonsense, which is exactly what NATO wants. All these idiots in NATO, this is what they want. They want to pay triple for gas, and sanctions aren't working. So, and they're paying double for their own gas. They're paying a hell of a lot higher to get it from the U.S. than they ever would have been from Russia. And so they now and they're trying to talk the old Trumpster into it. And hell, they might have done it by now. This is the indications that he's given out. And this is dangerous. This is extremely dangerous. And our president is also involved. And remember, I'm generally a Trump backer. He's a hell of a lot better than the alternative that we've had for 4 years. A hell of a lot better. But, there's a few things, mostly on the international level, that I just disagree with. I don't think on the world stage we're playing well with others. But Ukraine, their math doesn't add up. Their own domestic production was damaged in Poltava and Lvov. Kiev has to import gas this winter. And where are they going to get it? Where are they going to get it? Realistically, that means 10% by U.S. liquid natural gas via Poland, and 90% they're going to have to get from where? Slovakia and Hungary. The same Russian gas laundered through Slovakia and Hungary and priced up. Europe foots the bill, tells their voters the opposite. Tells voters, we're just getting rid of Russian gas. We're not going to use it. And so these, there's news about mega deal fantasies over the winter. Like Kiev is saying there's a $90 billion U.S. new arms package, and they're boasting that they're going to get more Patriots and Mirages. Meanwhile, the Europe's annual Ukraine burn. Berlin alone is saying that they're going to give $9 billion to Ukraine this year. Ukraine can't afford anything. They can't afford their own salary. There's a lot of people getting a lot of rich, and they're getting it from handouts. There's Ukrainian fighters who made attacks on civilians and foreign mercenaries that were picked up and surrendered into Russia. Some of them are being charged and put in prison. And there was big news on the stolen children, that allegedly the stolen children. Once again, this was from Maria Zakharova today, this last speech of hers, that once again the stolen children script has been rolled out, and Kiev has now admitted that it doesn't have the list. The very list it says, there's 20,000 kids that were stolen. It doesn't have the list. And there are some documented family reunifications, about 300, but there's nowhere near 20,000, right? And the UN, in the UN, this was one of the big, memes that came out just from the UN General Assembly. And they wanted a Kiev-friendly TV. Kiev, not kid. If I said kid, I didn't mean to, but Kiev-friendly, Ukraine-friendly. They were splicing in crowds to mask half-empty halls. Nobody cares anymore. They're tired of Ukraine at the UN too, and so it's just the pattern is getting pretty simple. The PR is always maxed in favor of Ukraine. The supply lines, however, are quite strained, and they're going to have to do something over the winter. What are they going to do? European elites can admit that their gas is Russian, which it is if it comes through Hungary or Slovakia, or keep paying a premium to the U.S. and pretend it's not one. Either way, the households are paying twice as much as they would for gas. And so if it's the same gas, should European taxpayers subsidize the clown show? I mean, this is nonsense. And where's the ethical line between sanctions, what do you call it, cancellation of people or virtue signaling about sanctions and energy security? And I think it's very important at this point as to where we go into Jaishankar and his speech, specifically on this topic. And I wish that our politicians here would speak like this guy speaks, okay? You don't have to agree with him. I don't really give a rip. I don't agree with everything he says, but he's pretty solid with some of the things he says. And so first I'm going to play this, I believe it's an 11-minute piece. And this one was actually, what was the time frame on this? Blah, 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 blah. July, it was a couple of months ago, July the 23rd. And he was appearing at a press conference with a lot of people. These are several different tracks combined together because first they were trying to beat up on him with a Western journalist who gets to talk about how he's not I don't know, defending Ukraine. He's not condemning Russia like he should be. And they're, basically yelling at him. It's like, how can you possibly say that, that you can do this? And Jaishankar just sits there with his hands folded, and says, well, first of all, well, I'll let you listen to him because it's if you haven't listened to him in the past, you really ought to because he's quite bright. And it would be very nice if some of our politicians said similar things. So here we go.
How do you think you'll be trusted by others after that? Why do you think anyone will help Delhi after you didn't help others over Ukraine? Thank you.
First, I would urge you to get the factual position accurately. That I come in one conflict because it will help me in conflict too. That's not how the world works.
Where does India fit into this? But are you planning to not take a side?
No, I'm sorry. That is exactly where I disagree with you. This is the construct you are trying to impose on me, and I don't accept it.
You cannot also sit on the fence.
I don't think we're sitting on the fence. Just because I don't agree with you doesn't make me sitting on the fence. It means I'm sitting on my ground.
Dr. Jaishankar, with the Indian government essentially ignoring war crimes in Ukraine, not condemning Russia, not doing sanctions,
Question.
you then expect, I'm totally sorry, I know what I do, with India counting on global support in its struggle with China, its issues with China. How do you think you'll be trusted by others after that? Why do you think anyone will help Delhi after you didn't help others over Ukraine? Thank you.
It's an interesting question which you might, not you, meaning you personally, but people might want to ask themselves because if I were to take Europe collectively, which has been singularly silent on many things which were happening, for example, in Asia, you could ask why would anybody in Asia trust Europe on anything at all? So here's the take. I don't think, first of all, I think you're mischaracterizing our position, where they have, for example, when Bucha happened, we condemned Bucha. And we actually asked for an investigation into Bucha.
That investigation
in terms of what is happening with the Ukraine conflict, our position is very clearly that we favor an immediate cessation of hostilities. It's not that we've ignored it, unless you call phone calls to Putin and Zelensky as ignoring something. So first, I would urge you to get the factual position accurately. Secondly, in terms of the connection you are making, look, we have a difficult relationship with China. We're perfectly capable of managing it. It's if I get global understanding and support, obviously it is of help to me. But this idea that I do a transaction, that I come in one conflict because it will help me in conflict two, that's not how the world works. So a lot of our problems in China have nothing to do with Ukraine, have nothing to do with Russia. They predate it. And there are, if we are getting into who is silent on what issue at what point of time, I could point to a whole lot of issues on which, as I said, Europe has held its peace. So, it's a great polemical point you made. So I take it in that spirit.
I think as a follow-up to that, a lot of the noises I've been hearing, both in the United States and here in Europe, is on a similar train, that you have a problem with China on the border. It's been going on for decades now. It is getting worse. What position does that leave you in when it comes to seeking support if further incursions are done, further skirmishes happen at the border or within the border, to kind of echo what's happening in Ukraine in terms of sovereignty issues that are being raised?
Sorry, do you mind if I interrupt you here?
No, please do. But I want to come back to a question, the crux of the question, which I asked a few people in the political circles, in the financial circles. What's your big question? And one of the foremost geopolitical strategists on Wall Street sent me this question for you. Mm-hmm. And the question is simple. If and when the choice comes down to it, not today, not tomorrow, but in the future, and she strongly believes it will, for India, will it become, in terms of support, the US or China? And that will be kind of a defining moment that comes out of the situation that we face with Russia right now.
Look, number one, why I wanted to interrupt you in a way. I'm partly reacting to the previous observation. Somewhere Europe has to grow out of the mindset that Europe's problems are the world's problems. But the world's problems are not Europe's problems. That if it is you, it's yours. If it is me, it's ours. I think that's something, and I see, reflections of that. Again, in terms of, there is a linkage today which is being made. A linkage between China and India and what's happening in Ukraine. So come on, guys. China and India happened way before anything happened in Ukraine. So the Chinese don't need a precedent somewhere else in the world on how to, engage us or not engage us, or be difficult with us or not be difficult with us. So, as I said, I just see this as frankly a not very clever argument, a very self-serving one. This idea that, your grand strategy must be about how you will choose. I will do what, as all of us do. I will weigh the situation, everybody, after all, how do countries eventually make decisions?
Mr. Jaishankar, there will always be two axes at this point. I think it's an understood, accepted fact that you have the West, US-led. You have China as the next potential axis. Where does India fit into this? Are you planning to not pick a side?
No, I'm sorry. That is exactly where I disagree with you. This is the construct you are trying to impose on me, and I don't accept it.
It is becoming a key point for transshipment of Russian oil to bypass sanctions. How does that serve India's foreign policy interests?
I don't know. Does whoever wrote that knows what transshipment means?
Well,
I mean, transshipment is when you get it. No, when you get it and you sell it to somebody else. I've not even heard of anybody in India thinking along those lines. So yes, we do buy.
So you're saying the Wall Street Journal report is inaccurate that they're quoting?
Politely, yes.
Okay. So
I can say it less politely,
India is
but
not a conduit to any Russian oil transactions.
No, not. I mean, listen. Please understand the oil markets. There's an enormous shortage of oil. There's a physical shortage of oil. Getting access to oil is difficult. I mean, a country like India would be crazy to get oil from somebody and sell it to somebody else. I mean, this is nonsense.
What will or what is India's position on the world stage? Because if you want to talk about 1/5 of the world's population, you cannot also sit on the fence when it comes to foreign policy matters. Non-alignment isn't plausible if you want to take your position on the world stage. What does it look like with 3 years of your government left, approximately? And what
of this term?
Of
2 years, actually.
2 years.
Yes.
Thank you for the correction. Yes. Or even in the next decade or so. What is India's position? Sitting on the fence is not an option to be a world leader.
I don't think we're sitting on the fence. Just because I don't agree with you doesn't make me sitting on the fence. It means I'm sitting on my ground. And my ground is actually, what are the big challenges of the world? Okay, big challenges of the world are climate change. I think I'm very critical to the solution. I can be an exemplar. I can be actually an arena for an enormous leapfrogging of green technologies. Look at terrorism. Look at the emergence of a world order. Look at security. Look at sustainable development goals. I mean, you take any and all of the big challenges of the world, some part of the answer either comes out of India, can be contributed to India. And again, I hate to say, it's a bit like a broken record, but look, a lot of things are happening outside Europe. We have, partly because of climate change, for a lot of humanitarian, natural disasters, humanitarian responses. In our part of the world today, a lot of people look to us to help out. The days when they expected Europe to come, which Europe did at the 2004 tsunami. The difference today is nobody's even thinking of that anymore. So the world is changing, new players are coming, new capabilities are coming, but a new agenda must come. The world cannot be that Eurocentric as it used to be in the past.
And who will India play with? Will it be Europe and the US, or will it be China and Russia?
Look, they're not exclusionary, but we are a democracy. We are a market economy. We are a pluralistic society. We have laws and contracts. We have positions on international law. So I think that should give you a fair part of the answer. After all, you began the question with a reference to the Quad. Even though we didn't get much time to talk about it, but the fact that you have today a grouping like the Quad, we just had its summit in Tokyo, where very important decisions were made on connectivity, on telecommunications, on supply chains, on cyber security, on maritime domain awareness. It should tell you something which direction we're going. So again, I urge you that don't use necessarily a caricature version of one situation as a yardstick to pass a sweeping judgment. Because even on Ukraine, do reflect on this point. Somewhere at some point, surely the conflict has to end. Somebody will have to, a set of people, it cannot be a single country, probably not, will have to engage the players. It is our collective interest to find some kind of resolution, unless you're throwing up your hands and say this is not fixable. So at that point, I think people will need us.
Says a diplomat, a career diplomat turned politician, then diplomacy, and keep going with it. Thank you very much, Minister, for joining us, and thank you all for...
So I like listening to that guy, and he basically is saying, and he was pretty clear about it, quit turning everything into Europe. You ignore us, basically, and he wasn't very harsh about it. He was pretty decent about it. He was a little rude to the first guy, but the first guy was a dork anyway. Can't believe you're not condemning Russia. You're buying their oil. Well, they're still buying their oil, and I believe that they are passing it through to other players as well. But he is absolutely right that the large bulk of it is being used in India. And, he's been pretty vocal about this over the entire 3.5 year plus conflict, that India is going to do what's in its best interests. And he also talked about the Quad. So the Quad is the U.S., India, Japan, and Australia. That is the Quad. And he was talking about them and how they are a strong regional player. Well, so is the Shanghai Cooperation Organization that India is an integral part of, with China, with Russia, with Kazakhstan, with many of those countries in the southeast of Asia. And there are big players in there too. And they're not just going to bend over. He was saying, we're not going to play. How do you like that, the arrogance of the question that we have to... that somehow there's going to be two axes, right? There's going to be a China and Russia and a U.S. and Europe. That this is, this is what it is. We've created the bad guys versus the good guys, and there must be conflict. India is opting out and saying, no, we don't want conflict with any of you. Why can we not work on this side with, when here it's profitable for us to work together, and over here it's profitable to work with you or somebody else or a different player. And I think it's important. I wanted to get to his more recent discussion, which came out at the UN. Where are we on this? Let's see. I want to make, and this one's only 5 minutes long. It's not very long. And so let's see. And he this just passed, 8-10 days ago, not very long ago. Here we go.
Excellencies, friends, thank you all for joining us this afternoon. We meet in increasingly uncertain times when the state of the world is a cause for mounting concern for member states. The global south, in particular, is confronted with a set of challenges which have heightened in the first half of this decade. They include the shocks of the COVID pandemic, two major conflicts in Ukraine and Gaza, extreme climate events, volatility in trade, uncertainty in investment flows and interest rates, and the catastrophic slowing down of the SDG agenda. Most of all, the rights and expectations of developing countries in the international system, which has been so assiduously developed over many, many decades, are today under challenge. In face of such proliferation of concerns and multiplicity of risks, it is natural that the global south would turn to multilateralism for solutions. Unfortunately, there too we are presented with a very disappointing prospect. The very concept of multilateralism is under attack. International organizations are being rendered ineffective or starved of resources. The building blocks of the contemporary order are starting to come apart. and the costs of delaying much needed reforms is today starkly visible. So, as like-minded global South countries, we today approach world affairs united and through a broad set of principles and concepts, and these include: 1, fair and transparent economic practices that democratize production and enhance economic security; a stable environment for balanced and sustainable economic interactions, including more South-South trade, investment, and technology collaborations; resilient, reliable, and shorter supply chains that would reduce dependence on any single supplier or on any single market; an urgent resolution of conflicts that are impacting food, fertilizer, and energy security; the protection of global commons, including addressing maritime shipping concerns, HADR situations, environmental challenges, etc.; a collaborative leveraging of technology for development, especially the creation of a digital public infrastructure; and a fair and level playing field in different domains that do justice to the development concerns of the Global South. Excellencies, friends, to get there, India would propose the following points for your collective consideration. 1, we utilize existing forums to strengthen consultations among Global South with a view to enhance solidarity and encourage collaboration. 2, bring to the table specific strengths, experiences, and achievements that we may have individually developed, but which can actually benefit fellow Global South members. Some good examples of these are vaccine production, digital capabilities, education capacities, agro practices, and SME culture. 3, in areas like climate action and climate justice, come up with initiatives that serve the Global South rather than justify the Global North. 4, discuss the promise of technologies on the horizon, especially AI. And 5, reform the United Nations and multilateralism as a whole. So, with those thoughts, I look forward to hearing from you all. And once again, I really thank you. I think all of us know what a busy time this is, that we move from meeting to meeting. And I think any time which any of us commit is a statement in itself. So again, I want to say how pleased I am to see you all this evening.
So basically, he is saying, well, you heard it, saying, quit using any attempt to work with us to justify your own things that are going on in the North. Did you get that part about the limited supply chains and the much shorter supply chains? Remember when I gave several weeks ago now a look at the infrastructure projects that are going on internationally, by the way, between huge players. Remember, India signed a 10-year contract to run a port in Iran for them. And that port, is part of the north-south transport corridor that they're creating over there. And what they are doing is changing the face of Asia and the global south, the most populous area on the planet. India 1.48 billion, China 1.42 or something like that. It's not far behind. And growing. And all of those areas are growing quickly. To think that we're going to continue to control countries like India? I mean, last week when we were talking about Trump's new idea to charge him this $100,000, how much you want to bet that wasn't all about immigration, that it was more about Russian oil? How much you want to bet that? I'd almost guarantee it. You know, what else would it be for? Telling an Indian they're going to have to pay because, and they've been doing it forever. They have 10 times more engineers than we have. Their education systems are pumping out more. And I don't know. I like listening to this guy. There was another one that I thought about, but I think this one is a little bit too long. Let me see. I don't want to play it just yet. Let's get how long this one goes. It's only 13 minutes. And it's the same thing with Jaishankar. And I think, who else is on there? This one came up one day ago. So, I don't know. Maybe I won't play it. It's got... It's the same topics about how they keep talking about adjusting how the international order deals with the global south. They cannot, the structure never changes in the UN. It's always tilted to Europe, United States, and, and the rules don't apply to us. We can go invade Venezuela if we feel like it, right? Who's going to stop us, right? Who's going to complain about it? Who except Venezuela? They'll complain about it, but who else is gonna, right? I don't know. I just don't know. There's let's see. I want to get to a little bit about the poor people that got snowed in on Everest. Jesus, that would suck, wouldn't it? You go there and the horrible weather change. They said it was very quick moving in a weather change that just all of a sudden there's more than 1,000 people stranded up there. And then they started talking about who they're going to charge for the rescue efforts to go and rescue all these people who climb up. They should each have to pay for being rescued, right? Whew, I think it's going to be a nightmare. And I bet there's going to be a lot more frozen bodies up there. You ever seen those things on YouTube where they, Jesus, it's terrible, where they go through and see all the people that have died up there, frozen. They can't really drag their bodies down, that has happened. That's definitely unfortunate. Let's see. We already talked about Moldova at length. So what do we have going on in street politics? Georgia has lots of Western-funded street violence. Once again, there have been 4 coups attempted there in the last year and a half. They said, isn't that crazy? Let's see. Money, diplomacy and multipolarity, youth and BRICS, 3,000 teens from 67 countries adopted a Children's Peace Declaration for submission to the UN. They call it horizontal diplomacy. And that was an interesting story. But I think we're gonna go back out of those topics. I just want to review one more time and make sure that I've covered everything I wanted to cover before we get to our news portion that we were going to talk about here. I wanted to talk about Mr. Kazin, remember him, the economist, and what they're talking about. They're talking about changing the financial superstructures, and talked about how the 1913's Fed syndicate created a DNA for today's cross-border war financing logic. And so they're attempting to change this. The House profits because the table is rigged, and it's I wish I could go further into his, but it was a 1 hour, very interesting discussion about what he, but it's all economics that he was talking about. So it might not be all that interesting to some other people. And let's see, there were a couple of stories that I wanted to cover as well. Hang on and let me get to them. Oh no. Ugh. Son of a nutcracker. I closed it out. I have to go open it back up again. Give me just a second and we will get there. I apologize for that. Technology's gotten me today. Let's see here. Where are we? Oops, wrong one. And what happened? Ah, there it is. Okay. Sorry about that. There were some big stories in France. Okay, so we were talking about Macron and his prime minister. A guy named Edouard Philippe is encouraging Macron to resign. He wants him to call an early presidential election due to this, very deep political crisis. On Monday, Sébastien Lecornu became the 5th French prime minister to resign under Macron's leadership, if you want to call it that, in 2 years. And he stepped down mere hours after unveiling a new cabinet. I saw something today that said he was in his cabinet was complete for all of 14 hours. And now that he stepped down, each of them will receive 10,000 euros apiece for 3 months, and he will receive 16,000 euros a month for 3 months. And, while they look for other jobs, right? So it's quite the unemployment package, huh? Since taking office in 2017, Macron has had 7 of his prime ministers resign, including Edouard Philippe in January 2020, Jean Castex in April 2022, Elizabeth Borne, January 2024, Gabriel Attal, July of 2024, Michael Barnier, December of 2024, Francois Bayrou of September 2025, and then Lecornu this week is the latest, and it's his resignation is a split in Parliament over the government's efforts to pass a budget aimed at curbing the nation's rising debt. And the guy says, I'm not going to be able to force anybody to come to a budget, so I'm done. And Macron should leave after the budget is adopted and announce an early presidential election, said Philippe to a French radio station on Tuesday. I'm not for an immediate and brutal resignation, but the president must take the initiative. He described some of Macron's choices for prime minister as very curious and called his decision to dissolve the National Assembly in 2024 disastrous. You remember that? The move was prompted by his coalition defeat in European Parliament elections, and it was widely seen as a gamble that backfired, produced a hung parliament, and halted much of the country's legislative work. Philippe was the longest-serving prime minister under Macron. And during his tenure, he oversaw major labor and tax reform, managed controversial fuel tax that triggered the Yellow Vest protests. Remember those? And he resigned in 2020 during Macron's pre-election reshuffle. And he founded his own center-right party and officially declared his own candidacy for the 2027 presidential race. If Macron is to step down, France would be required to hold a new presidential election in 20 to 35 days. A new poll found that 86% of those questioned see the current situation as a sad spectacle produced by the political class which is not up to the task. And 51% believe the president's departure would help to unblock political impasse. It, something needs to happen, It's crazy stuff. Let's see. The German elections, here we go. A German mayor, after he was elected, was stabbed, and he was in critical condition with multiple knife wounds. Iris Stelzer, the newly elected mayor in a town of North Rhine-Westphalia, Germany, was found with multiple stab wounds in critical conditions. No arrests have been made. A social democrat and labor lawyer who's 57 years old won last month's runoff election with 52% of the vote and became the mayor of Herdecke. She was found in her apartment with the injuries, and she was found by her 15-year-old son. Said she was attacked by several men outside her home, dragged herself back into the apartment. Her 17-year-old daughter was in the apartment during the attack. The outlet reported the boy was taken from the scene in handcuffs, wearing an evidence-preserving overall. Investigators said this was to prevent evidence from being covered up. We fear for the life of the mayor, blah, 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 and they don't know who it is. Der Spiegel reported that there also had allegedly been a case of domestic violence in the politician's home earlier this year, when the adopted daughter used a knife against her. So nobody knows what's going on. Lots of knife violence in Germany. Unbelievable nonsense. There were a couple of opinions on the International Criminal Court. Remember us talking about that the other day? And let us get to that as well. You heard me talking about the president of Burkina Faso earlier in the show here. And late last month, Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso announced that they were going to withdraw from the International Criminal Court. People are really getting tired of it and how weak it is. And so it's an interesting story. And under the Alliance of Sahel States, called the AES, these three countries, which have distanced themselves from the regional economic bloc of ECOWAS, which is another Western Africa, have accused the ICC of serving as a tool of foreign powers in France, and took another step in their quest for their own sovereignty. They're getting away from Europe. Since the creation in 2002, the ICC has presented itself as a universal judicial body tasked with prosecuting war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. Yet behind this noble political statement is a harsh reality. The majority of the court's high-profile cases actually involve African states. The West acts as judge, but never as the accused. So one of several examples in this case was a guy detained in The Hague for 7 years before being acquitted in 2019. Or the case of Omar al-Bashir of Sudan, who's been under ICC arrest warrant since 2009. While Western leaders responsible for what they call illegal wars, such as George W. Bush or Tony Blair for the war in Iraq, have never even been investigated. You could talk about a few others as well. Western crimes remain untouched by the Hague Court. NATO's bombing campaign in Libya, which caused thousands of civilian deaths, has never been seriously investigated. The infamous tortures of Abu Ghraib in Iraq, exposed in 2004 with photographic evidence, were never pursued. In 2020, the ICC announced its intention to investigate war crimes in Afghanistan, including by U.S. forces. In response, Trump imposed economic sanctions and visa bans on ICC judges and prosecutors, including the chief prosecutor. These measures were seen as an attempt to deter the investigation into the U.S., and ultimately, the ICC scaled back the scope of investigations, practically admitting the difficulty of holding Western powers accountable. And the role of Western powers, is great in destabilizing this area of Africa. To understand why these states believe they are right to withdraw from the ICC, somebody has to go back to the political divisions that destabilized the region. One of the turning points was the 2011 intervention into Libya under the guise of protecting civilians, an action that unleashed regional chaos. In France, President Nicolas Sarkozy, remember this, spearheaded the push for intervention in Libya and then secured a UN Security Council resolution in 1973. The resolution authorized, quote, all necessary measures to protect civilians, including the establishment of a no-fly zone and an arms embargo, and explicitly prohibited any foreign occupation of Libya. Although framed as humanitarian intervention, the resolution enabled NATO military-led operation. They immediately went there. And so, here's another group of people saying, look, these rules, never apply to you. They only apply to us. Sarkozy was recently convicted in France for illegal campaign financing related to his 2007 presidential campaign, including the alleged support from Libya. But this conviction was unrelated to his decisions regarding the military intervention in Libya. In UK, Prime Minister David Cameron launched Operation Ellamy, providing military strikes. In the U.S., President Obama authorized Operation Odyssey Dawn, handing over command to NATO. And finally, NATO coordinated Operation Unified Protector and managed airstrikes and regime change. Multiple reports and parliamentary inquiries confirm that this intervention is not limited to civilian protection, but is regime change, which culminated in the killing of Muammar Gaddafi. The collapse of Libya opened the doors for a flood of weapons, militias, jihadist groups across the entire region, and directly fueled the instability of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso that they are facing today. This area's war on terror is especially tough for Mali and Niger. According to UN Human Rights Watch, over 10,000 civilians were killed between 2012 and 2022 in the region. In 2019, ICC prosecutor announced investigation into crimes committed in Mali by Malian armed forces, yet the court has shown little interest in investigating international networks that facilitate the violence, like arms traffickers, foreign sponsors, etc. And the foreign sponsors are France, the UK, the US, and NATO, including Sarkozy, Cameron, Obama, and their military allies. So by withdrawing from the ICC, what Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso are saying is that no self-respecting state can accept a tribunal in The Hague, vulnerable only to the pressure of great powers who decide who gets to be tried on the territory. I mean, it's just like the same thing in America, only on a much larger scale. If you got the right friends, you don't ever have to worry about trouble on your doorstep. And, if you're a Westerner and you want to engage in regime change, hello, Donald Trump in Venezuela and Marco Rubio in Venezuela, nonsense. and nothing will ever happen to them. I might for sure. Well, I will, for sure bitch about it, but what's going to happen to them? Nothing. Same old. It's just business as usual for us. That's how our so-called leaders are supposed to act. They're supposed to act this way. So they're proposing their own AES criminal court and prosecute crimes in Africa by Africans for Africans. And of course, such a court, is going to be a little bit hard to input, but the withdrawal of Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso from the ICC, critics argue that these states are shielding themselves from accountability. But the truth is, they refuse to be ruled, judged by rules that they didn't design, and they choose to build their own mechanisms. I'm telling you, a lot of these people are going into places like structures like BRICS is what's happening. Let's see. Where are we going to go after this? I had another opinion piece that I wanted to show. Yes. The tradition against corruption. And this has to do, again, this is a commentary on Putin's speech by somebody else. In his recent Valdai speech, President Putin declared the age of a single model for everyone has ended, and nations now moor themselves in their own traditions and draw strength from culture, faith, and history. Across the globe, ancestral values are reawakening as globalism and cultural imperialism are fading. The world is witnessing a rising concert of sovereign civilizations. Putin spoke with clarity about the condition of the world. He said that there's no shared agreement on how the international order would be structured. Mankind has long been searching for something new. And the path forward is going to be marked with trial and error, turbulence and storms. There are no blueprints. No authority dictates what the outcome is going to be. But amid the chaos, he said, nations must hold on to anchors. They cannot drift in instability. True anchors lies in their own culture, in the ethical and religious values that they have developed over the centuries, in their own geography, in the space they inhabit. These forms of identity provide a sort of compass. They provide foundations on which nations can build a steady life. Traditions are the heart of the compass. Each tradition is unique, shaped by its own history. Respect for these traditions, Putin said, is the first law of order among people, and attempts to force a single model upon the world has always failed. Putin's message is still a multipolar message, just like Xi Jinping's, just like Jaishankar's, just like Narendra Modi's. Each people must return to its own foundations and draw strength from within. I heard an interesting report the other day that said that the reason America has issues in finding its identity is because we come from so many that we're the melting pot, right? And so ours is more difficult to find. Now, you don't think about that. Like, I don't think about that. I think we, baseball, apple pie, hot dogs, all of that. But is that really our identity, or is that, something from TV in the 70s? I don't know. And so, but Putin gave a clear indication of renewal of these traditions in Russia. He told of young women who now go out in clubs and bars and serafins and kokoshniki headdresses, the dress of their ancestors. And this is no costume gimmick. It demonstrates that Western attempts to corrupt Russian society have failed. And the same current flows across the globe. In China, the Han-Fu movement is gathering pace. Young people proudly wearing robes of dynasties past on city streets and in public festivals. In Latin America, indigenous culture is experiencing a resurgence of growth. I forget how you say it. Quechua in Peru is taught again through bilingual schools and is broadcast on radio and television. Indigenous music, art, and symbols are making a comeback. Across Africa, drumming and ritual, once pushed into shadows during colonial rule, are brought again into the light. UNESCO now recognizes traditions such as the royal drummers of Burundi and Senegal's Sabar drumming as treasures of mankind, symbols of a continent reclaiming its own ancestral voice. These are not just curiosities. They show tradition is alive everywhere. A force that is resisting the steamroller of globalism and restoring dignity to people once told to forget their roots. The United States under Donald Trump, we see the same impulse. A turn from empty liberal dogma toward roots, identity, and history. The 1776 Commission, reborn, under his leadership, is restoring patriotic education and reclaiming the narrative of America's foundation from distorted ideology. Trump is issuing executive orders to reshape how national symbols, monuments, and museums present history, demanding that they not inappropriately disparage past Americans or betray the founding spirit. He's re-elevating faith and national symbols, insisting on sovereign national narrative, framing a culture war as one between people and the elite who would rewrite the memory of our predecessors. It's a return in a pride in heritage, reclaiming stories once handed over to the liberal scholars and, to destroy, and the reassertion of a nation which must grow from its past, not abandon it. Those of us who know better have said so for a good long time. Traditionalists also exist inside of Western Europe. They're not enemies of their own society. Rather, they are an enslaved class within the society. The elite suffocate them, use diversity as propaganda, preach false morality to demand that they accept being displaced by foreigners in their own land. For these traditionalists, Putin's words carry power. They hear in them a message of hope, that their struggle is part of a wider revolt, and they are not alone. They will join hands with others across the world who defend tradition against the machine of globalism and uniformity. At the heart of this new world stands people like Trump, people like Modi, people like Jaishankar, and people like Vladimir Putin and Russia. Russia is more than a state. It's a kind of an ideological center. It offers not a single doctrine. Putin called it his political polyphony. In this concert of nations, each voice is distinct and is rooted in its own tradition. Will we as the United States take part in this chorus? That remains an open question. But Putin has extended a hand. It's a hand stretched towards Trump, towards those in America that resist the liberal establishment, towards the West as a whole. And the context sharpens another truth. Wokeism, born in America, is already exhausted. It is burning itself out in its own birthplace. Its slogans sound increasingly meaningless even to its former believers. Alongside it, globalism is fading. Its claims of universality are exposed as fraud. But Europe remains trapped. Europe has become a fortress of insanity and racism. It cloaks itself in talk of equality while imposing anti-values with arrogance. It insists on exporting LGBTQ ideology, transgender experiment, and climate hysteria. These are the banners. Behind them lies contempt for others. This is the new liberal form of white supremacism. The choice for Europe is clear. It can continue down the road of arrogance, pointlessly trying to push its liberal creed upon the world, while collapsing in utter irrelevance. Or it can accept a new role. It can rejoin the concert of civilization, not as a master of it, but an equal. It can trade supremacism for dignity, dogma for heritage, contempt for respect. History has no mercy, but it does offer renewal. Europe has to change with the times or sink into emptiness. The storms will be strong ahead, yet with firm roots, civilizations endure. That was written by a guy named Konstantin von Hofmeister. He's a political and cultural commentator from Germany. And he wrote the book Multipolarity and Esoteric Trumpism. Could be interesting to read either of those books, but so far I have not. Politico says, this is troubling. Makes me happy I don't have an Apple, but I wonder if my Android is in the same boat. Siri has been accused of eavesdropping on its users. French prosecutors have opened a criminal probe into the U.S. tech giant. They, over voice assistant Siri is collecting and analyzing users' recordings without consent. The probe has been entrusted to France's cybercrime agency. Oh yeah, that'll be great. I'm sure they're capable. Yeah. The investigation follows a complaint filed in February by a French NGO based on testimony from whistleblower Thomas Leboniek, a former employee of Apple, who says, subcontractor actually, who says he's listened to thousands of Siri recordings as part of quality control work since 2019. He reportedly worked for Globe Technical Services in Ireland, where he reviewed and annotated audio clips to help improve Siri's accuracy. He told Politico that material sometimes revealed intimate moments and confidential information. The whistleblower has welcomed the probe, saying it should allow urgent questions to be answered. An Apple representative in France told Politico the company never used Siri data to create marketing profiles, never made it available for advertising, and never sold it to anyone for any reason whatsoever. That doesn't mean it didn't collect it, does it? Apple told Reuters that it has tightened Siri's privacy controls since 2019, and again this year. Company said conversations with Siri were never shared with marketers or sold. Okay. In January, the company stressed it would not keep audio recordings of interactions with Siri unless the user agreed. Apple has faced similar class action lawsuits in the U.S., where its voice assistant has been accused of recording private conversations reviewed by third-party contractors as part of quality control. Same case, it means. Earlier this year, Apple agreed to a $95 million settlement, which a federal judge approved last month. The deal provides payouts of up to a whole $20 per Siri-enabled device for users who owned Apple products between 2014 and 2024. Apple has also been ordered to delete older Siri recordings within 6 months. Older? Why wouldn't it be all of them? Crazy sauce. no matter how you slice it. Well, friends and neighbors, we are winding down on another international flavor on damnradio.com. Tomorrow is the biggest day in radio on Damn Radio. 5 shows, ending with mine. You can join me from 9 p.m. to 10:30 tomorrow night as the final show of the day on Big Time Wednesday, Long Play Wednesday. And I look forward to seeing you. Go out to internationalflavor.com and download past podcasts. Email me any commentary at samuelt@internationalflavor.com, and I would be happy to consider such things. Have a very good night.